Okay, hello Year 12. Had a bit of feedback from you, and some of you suggested that having a commentary with the PowerPoints would be helpful, so we'll give it a try, see what you make of it. It's actually my third effort. The last two have been too long to go on YouTube, so I'll try and get on with it this time. Right, so moving on to social learning theory, you need to see how this is a progression from where you were last time, looking at the behaviourist approach, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, all of that. Basically, stimulus response. You encounter this and you respond this way. And this takes it a step forward, saying, well, hold on a second, maybe in a mouse or a rat or a pigeon, that might be the case, but we've got more, hopefully, going on up here. So this takes into account the mediational processes in all of this. So, developed by Bandura, one of the big names in psychology. Yes, he's not dismissing what's gone before. He's saying, yes, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, fine. But actually, that doesn't account for all learning. Actually, we can learn acquired behaviours through observation, as we'll come to in a bit, and that there's really important mental processes that mediate, go between stimulus and response. Now, the main idea is really straightforward. You can learn by observing somebody else perform behaviour. My usual example in the classroom, if I ask a question, somebody puts up their hand and answers, and I give them £5. Chances are next time I ask a question, more people are going to put their hands up that might not have done before. So those people who have acquired a behaviour hasn't been reinforced directly. They haven't been rewarded for anything, but they've seen a model perform that behaviour. And as we'll see later on, they've seen that model be rewarded for the behaviour, making imitation all the more likely. That's the main idea. We can learn through observation. So a lot of terminology to get your head around with social learning theory. Vicarious reinforcement is one to use. And this is all about that, seeing the consequences of the model's actions. So, as you might expect, if you see the model being rewarded, you're more likely to replicate their actions. If you see them punished, then you're less likely. No great surprises there. Now, this is the important bit. Mediational processes. You will sometimes see questions that specify this element of the theory. So this is all the cognitive processes that go on, as we said earlier, between stimulus response. This is all the things that can go on up here that determine whether we're going to reproduce this behaviour or not. So, first of all, attention. You've got to be paying attention to the model. If you're not paying attention to the model, then there's no way you're going to take on their behaviour at all. So, say if you get a scenario, is it a funny film, a funny advert, a particularly entertaining, unusual thing that you're seeing that would get your attention. Secondly, retention. This is the storage side of things. You've got to remember this. Reproduction might not be something you do straight away. It might be that there's a later occasion where you can reproduce this behaviour. So that has to be stored. And again, the more novel it is, the more interesting, the more likely it is to be stored. So you paid attention to it and you've retained the information. Then we have these mediational processes, two more, motor reproduction. Now, this one is, do you think you have the ability to recreate the behaviour? You can see somebody do something, you can see them be rewarded for it. It doesn't mean you can do it, and you may well make that judgment that you can't. I have got a rather weird example for this. The Gruffalo ride at Chessington. We were there that day one, very excited with the boys. And while we're in the massive queue, opposite there is a challenge where you had to hang from a metal bar for 2 minutes to win something. And we were standing there watching all these different people come along, mostly sort of blokey type blokes, you happy with that. And they would do it and they get applause and all of that. Wonderful. Now I saw that. I was paying attention to it. It was memorable, very entertaining. There's no way I was going to try and do it because I knew I couldn't. I'd be humiliated. My boys would be scarred for life. So that was me recognising that despite having seen these models, who I'd identify with, we'll come to that in a bit, I didn't personally feel that I had the skill to do it. And then the last one is motivation, and so this particularly ties in with the reward element. If you think you're going to get a positive outcome, then you're more likely to replicate the behaviour. So those are the 4 mediational processes. Keep an eye out for that term. Not all models are equal. Modelling, taking on the behaviour is more likely, depending on who the model is, the nature of them. So what kind of things can make it more likely? So if you see yourself as similar to them, same age, same sex, whatever, then it's more likely. if you see them as attractive, not necessarily physically, but through their skills, humour, whatever. And also if they have high status. So yes, celebrity, you'll see sample questions with sports people and things like that. So not all models are equal. I give the example of awards evening. We don't have some old bloke come in and talk about what he did and all of that. We get a female who might have been to the same school or from the same area or the same sort of background, so that hopefully the onlooking students can identify with them and be more likely to maybe take on some of their behaviours. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to push pause in a bit and have a go at the activity sheet that has been emailed across to you. What you've got to do, either annotating or highlighting, is for each scenario, 3 different scenarios, pick out the how it can be explained by the behavioural approach from last time. So it's the classical conditioning, operant conditioning, sorry about that. And also today's lesson, social learning theory. Can you talk about these mediating processes, reinforcement and all of that? So push pause and have a go at this activity. Okay, so I'm not going to hang around on this because I do need to watch the clock. So for the first one, let's just go with social learning theory. He's got posters of weightlifters all over his walls. So he's going to identify them. They're going to have high status for him. And he goes on to replicate those behaviours and then gets rewarded himself. So that would be social learning theory. But there's also direct reinforcement through the trophies he's won too. Louise, social learning theory isn't difficult within the family context. A lot of people in the family smoke, so easy to apply social learning theory there. She's seen her mum rewarded for this. The wording is phew, that's better, but it's certainly not for Louise. It keeps coughing. So yes, just because it's rewarding for somebody else, yes, you might take on that behaviour, but not necessarily continue with it if it's not rewarding for her. And then Carl, with the recycling, he's been rewarded for it himself through the praise at school from the mayor, from the head teacher. And then social learning theory, you've got other students now having paid attention, listened, seen the reward, got the motivation and all that. They think they've got the ability to reproduce this. They've now gone on and modelled that behaviour themselves. Okay, so I know that's very quick, but hopefully you've got down some of those ideas and maybe some additional ones as well. So the key study, Bandura study, the Bobadil study that looks into this. Again, I'm going to ask you to pause, have a look at this video. Starts with the intro from Bandura himself and then takes you through some quite entertaining scenarios from the original footage. Okay, we'll come back to that study in just a bit. So yeah, I need to keep this concise, so we are going to go to a model answer just to keep it tight. So how would you write a 16-mark response to on the social learning theory approach? So lots to talk about for AO1, no excuse not to have this in place. We're going to do it again for regression topics, so we need to know it really well, all that terminology. Don't jump in with the cognitive processes too quickly. Make sure you set the scene, where it's coming from, the idea that we can learn through observation, talk about vicarious reinforcement, yes, talk about all those mediating cognitive factors, talk about identification, imitation, and all those things as well. So plenty to talk about there to really show off the knowledge and get a solid AO1 section in place. Now, the Bobadil study obviously is going to be a main source of evidence for this. The children have watched an aggressive model, replicated many of the novel aggressive actions that they had seen, and that ultimately supports the theory. I know I'm glossing over it very quickly here. It's a very well-known study. There's plenty of extra material in the book or online if you want to read up more, but we will hopefully under normal circumstances, when we do aggression, we will pause and spend much more time looking at this study. But ultimately, it supports the key proposals. Don't forget, crucially, don't get sucked in too much by the procedures. It's all about the explanation. How does it support the theory? And then, yes, there's plenty to say about this study, so we can have a counterpoint here, a bit of a cautionary point. There's a question of demand characteristics. Were the children doing what they thought they should be doing? Also, does it really reflect everyday settings? Well, it's just there. There's no build up to the aggression. There's no justification. There's no risk of consequences. So when we talk about ecological validity, can you generalize these findings to other settings? Well, potentially not. So those are a couple of things we could say there. but please be careful. I've seen far too many essays turn into Bobo-Dole essays when actually this is just another study to use. So yes, talk about it, say how it supports a theory, but then move. Then we need to move away, look at some broader points. So plenty of things you've used here as always. I'm perfectly happy for you to use any commentary point you want to, as long as you understand it, you know what to do with it. These are to show you potential points in style. So we've got the Kunsang tribe, that's not a typo, that is where the exclamation mark goes. And they have a very low level of aggression in society compared to other cultures that have a high level of aggression. Now, if you look at evolutionary theory, which we'll do next year, you'd expect this to be consistent. If it's adaptive, if it's innate, then it should be consistent, but it's not. So that's a strength of social learning theory, because it can be used to explain these cultural differences through the lack of reinforcement. They don't reinforce negative aggressive behaviour by children. They certainly don't model the aggressive behaviour. So therefore, social learning theory can explain this in ways that other theories, such as evolutionary theory, would struggle. So we've got research support. We've got a broader strength in terms of cultural variations. But then we do need a cautionary point as well. And we will talk about nature-nurture in greater depth next year, for issues and debates. This is very much the nurture side of things, doesn't take into account nature, so the biological factors that could be playing a role in this. We got a bit further with this. Common finding with the Bobo study was boys more aggressive than girls. That could be down to biological factors. So social learning theory in itself doesn't take that into account. Realistically, we're going to need to consider an interaction of the two. So that would be a very solid 16 marker. Of course, some of you have the speed to add in another commentary point. That's absolutely fine. There's plenty that you could add. Okay, so I've kept it quick. Hopefully I'll be short enough to actually get this uploaded onto YouTube. So now it's over to you. I've emailed you a set of questions to have a go at. Please keep an eye on your workouts. Some of them were far too long. Originally wonderful content, but just completely unrealistic. Watch out for that. Some of them did refer to behaviourists, what we did last lesson, particularly question 1. And watch out for those mediational processes. Okay, I look forward to receiving those. I'll do another video if this goes down well next time. Okay, have a good weekend. Bye.